I need to tell someone about what happened at my new job. I need to get this down before I forget the details, because part of me is already starting to doubt what I saw. But I know it happened. I know it did. 3 weeks ago, I started working as a night security guard at Meridian Medical Center in downtown Portland. It's one of those massive hospital complexes that sprawls across 4 city blocks. The kind of place where you can get lost even with a map. The pay was decent, and honestly, after 6 months of unemployment, I wasn't in a position to be picky. My supervisor, Janet, walked me through my rounds on the first night. Standard stuff: check the doors, monitor the cameras, make sure the skeleton crew upstairs wasn't having any issues. The overnight shift was mostly empty except for the ICU and emergency department, which had their own security anyway. Just avoid the 3rd floor, Janet mentioned as we finished the tour. Construction zone, been closed off for renovations since March. I asked what kind of renovations, but she just shrugged and said something about asbestos removal. Made sense. These old hospitals are full of that stuff. The first 2 weeks were uneventful. I'd make my rounds every 2 hours, spending the rest of my time reading or watching Netflix in the security office. The building had that particular hospital quiet at night, not silent, but filled with the constant hum of ventilation systems and distant medical equipment. Fluorescent lights flickered occasionally in the hallways, casting long shadows that danced across polished linoleum floors. It was on my 15th night that I first heard the elevator. I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds when I heard the familiar ding of elevator doors opening on the floor above me. Nothing unusual about that. The ICU staff used the elevators all night. But as I continued down the 2nd floor hallway, I heard it again. Then again. Ding, ding, ding. It was coming from the 3rd floor. I stopped walking and listened. The sound was rhythmic, like someone was repeatedly calling the elevator and letting the doors close without getting on. Every 30 seconds or so. Ding. I figured maybe it was a malfunction. Old buildings, old elevators. I made a mental note to mention it to Janet in the morning and continued my rounds. But the next night it happened again. Same time, just after 2 a.m., that rhythmic dinging from the 3rd floor, lasting about 10 minutes before stopping completely. On the 17th night, I decided to investigate. The elevator bank was located in the central hub of the building. 4 elevators serviced all 6 floors, but according to the control panel, Elevator 3 was locked out from accessing the 3rd floor. Had been since March, Janet had mentioned. So how was I hearing elevator doors opening up there? I took Elevator 1 to the 4th floor and found the stairwell. The door to the 3rd floor was marked with yellow caution tape and a sign reading, "Authorized personnel only, construction zone." I'm not proud of what I did next, but curiosity got the better of me. I peeled back the tape and tried the handle. It was unlocked. The 3rd floor was dark, except for emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly red glow. The air smelled like dust and something else. Something antiseptic but wrong, like cleaning chemicals mixed with something organic. Construction plastic hung from the ceiling in long sheets, creating a maze of translucent barriers that rustled softly in the air conditioning draft. I pulled out my phone's flashlight and made my way toward where I thought the elevator bank would be. The layout was similar to the floors below, but everything felt off. The hallways seemed longer, the ceiling lower. My footsteps echoed strangely, as if the sound was being absorbed and reflected by surfaces that shouldn't have been there. That's when I found the waiting room. It wasn't on any of the floor plans I'd seen. Just a small area with a dozen plastic chairs arranged in neat rows, facing a reception desk that looked like it had been abandoned mid-task. Papers were scattered across the surface, and an old CRT monitor displayed a blue screensaver that pulsed slowly in the darkness. What struck me most was how clean everything was. No dust, no construction debris. The chairs looked like they'd been recently wiped down, and the magazines on the side table were neatly arranged. And that's when I heard the elevator again. Ding! I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the plastic sheets. The sound had come from directly behind me, But there was no elevator there, just a wall with a hand-painted sign that read Radiology, Walk-ins welcome. I approached the wall and ran my hand along its surface. Solid. No elevator doors, no mechanism, nothing. But I had definitely heard that sound, and it had come from right here. That's when I noticed the clipboard. It was hanging on a small hook next to where the elevator doors should have been. A simple metal clipboard with a pen attached by a small chain. At the top of the page, in faded blue ink, someone had written, "Patient sign-in." Below that were names. Dozens of them, written in different handwriting, different pens. Some entries were dated from the 1980s, others from the 90s, and a few from the early 2000s. The most recent entry was from March 15th of this year. Margaret Chen, 3:17 a.m., waiting for test results. March 15th was the day they closed the third floor for renovations. I took photos of the clipboard with my phone and got out of there as fast as I could. Back in the security office, I spent the rest of my shift researching the names I'd seen. What I found made my blood run cold. Every single person on that list had been a patient at Meridian Medical Center, and every single one of them had died. Margaret Chen, the most recent entry, had been brought to the emergency department on March 14th with chest pains. She died of a heart attack while waiting for her test results. At 3:17 a.m. Thomas Williamson, dated February 8, 2003, died of complications during surgery. Sarah Nakamura, January 23, 1997, overdose in the parking lot after being discharged. The list went on and on, a catalog of deaths spanning decades. They had all died while waiting for test results, waiting for surgery, waiting for news about loved ones. All of them had died in a state of unfinished business, of questions left unanswered. I should have quit right then. Should have walked out and never looked back. But I needed this job. And part of me, the part that had always been drawn to mysteries, needed to understand what was happening. So I went back the next night. The third floor was exactly as I'd left it, but something was different. The waiting room chairs had been rearranged. Instead of neat rows, they were now arranged in a circle, all facing inward toward an empty space in the center. And there was a new name on the clipboard. David Morrison, 2:33 a.m., waiting for answers. David Morrison was me. That was my name, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. But the timestamp was wrong. It was only 2:15 a.m. I had 18 minutes to figure out what was happening. I ran back to the security office and pulled up the personnel files on the computer. I searched for any record of what had actually happened on the third floor, why it had really been closed down. The official reports all mentioned asbestos and structural issues, but buried deep in the maintenance logs, I found something else. Equipment malfunctions. Starting in January, the third floor had experienced a series of inexplicable technical failures. Elevator doors opening and closing on their own. Computer systems displaying patient information for people who had been dead for years. Security cameras recording empty hallways where staff members reported seeing figures that weren't there. The incidents had escalated throughout February and into March. Nurses reported hearing their names called from empty rooms. Patients complained about being kept waiting for hours, even though the third floor had been officially closed since the first week of February. The final incident was on March 15th. A night security guard named Vincent Torres had been found in the third floor waiting room, unconscious and unresponsive. He was rushed to the ICU, but died 3 days later. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, but the attending physician noted something unusual in the report. Torres had died at exactly 3:17 a.m., the same time as Margaret Chen. I looked at my phone. 2:31 a.m., 2 minutes. I ran. Not toward the third floor, not toward the elevator, but toward the exit. I had to get out of the building, had to put distance between myself and whatever was waiting for me in that room. I made it to the parking lot before I heard it one last time. The elevator ding. echoing through the empty night air, even though I was 3 blocks away from the hospital. I never went back to work. I called in sick the next day, then the day after that, until finally Janet stopped returning my calls. I heard through a friend of a friend that they found my security badge and uniform in the third-floor waiting room, neatly folded on one of the plastic chairs. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. I looked up Vincent Torres, the guard who died in March. He had been asking questions too, investigating the strange occurrences, trying to understand what was happening on the third floor. And according to his final log entry, he had found something. Something about the hospital's history, about why certain patients never seem to leave, even after death. I never found out what Vincent discovered, and I'm not sure I want to. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that elevator ding in my dreams. And I wonder if somewhere, in a waiting room that shouldn't exist, my name is still written on a clipboard, waiting for answers I'm afraid to find. The thing is, I keep thinking about those chairs arranged in a circle, like they were waiting for someone to join them, like they were waiting for me.